I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome, everyone, to Arcane Mark Asks Jason Keeley. We have Jason here on the show to ask him all of our questions and all of your questions, too. Jason, welcome.
Hi. How's it going? How's everyone doing?
It's going pretty well.
Going all right over here.
It's in the whole Gen Con run-up, so Organized Play's been pretty busy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I know you certainly know busy being on the Starfinder team as well.
Mm-hmm. I just got to get a couple more things done, and then it's Gen Con. Oh, boy.
Yay. All right.
So you're going to be at Gen Con this year, Jason?
I'm pretty sure. Yes.
Good.
I'll be there.
Sweet.
So let's get started with the interview and start off like we like to start off the interview by asking two questions. First, how did you get into Pathfinder, just in general?
Yes. Well, I got into I was running GMing stuff for a few years. I started my role-playing game career a little later in my life, but once I was introduced to it, I was immediately hooked and turned to GMing. And I was running, the 3.5 stuff. I was running some Eberron and whatnot. But I was picked up the occasional Dungeon and Dragon magazine, which was being done by Paizo at the time, and I loved the adventures, and I was using them whenever I could. And then basically, heard about the 4th edition and Pathfinder, and decided, hey, I'd been subscribing to the Adventure Paths, the Pathfinder Adventure Paths before that, so I was I hadn't quite run any of them yet, but I was excited to read them. When Paizo switched over to Pathfinder, I was like, "Yep, I'm right along with the ride." I ran Council of Thieves like when it was coming out, took and then just ran a bunch of other adventure paths from there, and just enjoyed every volume and book that I picked up.
So you had Council of Thieves early in your Pathfinder career too, then?
That's right. Man. We actually ran it as an evil campaign.
Oh,
where one of the characters was a cousin to Abigail Thrune. So he was a Thrune, and he was just coming into West Crown to clean it up and take over. And honestly, I ran it not much different than how it was written. Just the motivations of the PCs were like, this bad guy he's an idiot. We could do this much better than him. Let's kill this other bad guy and take over. So.
Oh yeah, totally. What about that first encounter where you're in that room and then the lady you're with is like, oh, we're gonna take down Thrune and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
The Hell Knights show up.
Down with Thrune.
I think I modified that a little bit. It's more like you're infiltrating this group of do-gooders because they might know something about all the weird stuff that's happening in West Crown. So they just sort of snuck in and then had all that, and then they sort of basically took over from there. I think they took that one priest you meet and was like bullying him around and heal me, just sort of carrying him around just from encounter to encounter, using him as a wand of cure light wounds.
That's right, Ariel, the racist priest of Iomade.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, very cool. So then the second question we'd like to sometimes ask is how you got started working for Paizo. If I recall, you were working on professionally working on crossword puzzles right before that, right?
That's right. For many years before that, my job was editing crossword puzzles for a puzzle magazine publisher. For a bit before that, I was working on other puzzles, but for 2 years before I came over to Paizo, it was mainly crosswords. And they were great to me and kept me around when things weren't going so well, because they were a print business, and we all know how that goes, especially super niche print business. And they were slow to catch up to the times. It was like, just waiting, let's get a digital app, do this, and that we were just sort of constantly print. So they were bumping me around departments and stuff like that. And I just started getting. I was living in New York City at the time, and I was just getting a little exhausted by the city. So I started looking for other jobs, and happened to notice that there was an editor position open at Paizo, and I applied for that right away. Did the test, got it, had an interview, with James Sutter and Wes Schneider, and just on on digital on camera. Not I didn't come to Washington to do that, but it turns out that that particular position was only supposed to be like a 6-month contract position. So Sutter was like, "We're not going to offer this to you because we don't want you to move all the way across the country for a job that might not exist in 6 months." And I was like, "Oh, that's totally understandable. I get that. I'll just start doing freelance." I did some freelance editing. I did some freelance writing, and eventually saw that about 8 months later, there was a developer position also opening up, several of them, I imagine. And I applied for that, and I started taking the test. I did took the test. I sent that in, and then I also started doing RPG Superstar right around then as well. And then come January, later that during that cycle, Sutter got back to me and was like, "Well, we have an editor who's just leaving. You're still in the running for the developer test, but we could just offer you this editor position." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll take the official job that I feel more, comfortable and in line with, and hopefully someone else awesome will get the developer position." So that's basically what happened, and I didn't have to interview again. I just sort of got the job, which is pretty cool, because I guess I made a good impression.
Yeah, I can see why you would.
Yeah, so I had to drop out of RPG Superstar right then and there, and
you weren't a fan anymore.
I was not a fan anymore.
You can still be a fan, but you were part of the industry.
Exactly. At the time, we're doing some other freelance. I had my own small publishing company too that I had started a few years before to sort of work on some stuff. Like we put out a 3.5 setting right around the time when 3.5 and Pathfinder were diverging, and because of my really good timing, and then I put out a game of my own. Well, some other people worked on, of course, did the design. I sort of did the editing and the layout for it, but it's our little game, and it was pretty cool for a time. And then we just sort of it was just like 3 of us. And it was really difficult to keep up because I was going to move away. I was moving away, and somebody else is moving away from New York City to Texas. So that company doesn't technically exist anymore. But it prepared me a lot for working in the industry.
Awesome. And that was your tarot card based Renaissance game?
Yeah. It's a tarot card based fantasy Renaissance game. And so it was basically like historically Renaissance Europe, but with like elves and dwarves and magic in it. So and it had a really cool, unique tarot card based resolution system that was actually more mechanical than some of the other ones that might be out there. With not knocking them, of course, but they sometimes have a little more interpretive ways of looking at things. Whereas you had specific cards and numbers that you were trying to hit, like rolling a die, flipping a card, and trying to hit a target number, basically. It's still a good system. I would still try to use that. I've thought about readapting it for some other settings and whatnot, but I never got around to it.
Well, you ran us through that one shot one time. That was a lot of fun.
Yes, the Pinocchio one.
The Pinocchio one.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was the blue fairy.
Yes.
The elven blue fairy who just tried to poison everything that was there.
Right.
And I was the guy who kept failing every single check because I got terrible luck and it was hilarious.
Yeah.
I remember when I almost walked into the traps that the other PCs set because I failed to go through the portal, and so I had to ride on a camel for across the desert.
Were you like the Ottoman Turkish goblin?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. The Turkish goblin was a good fencer, but not as lucky as some of the other characters. And luck in that game is kind of actually codified into specific major arcana cards that are good for you and bad for you. So it's not just, but there's also a bit of luck of the draw of the card. So.
Yep.
So I think it's funny that folks realized that we were in very similar buildings.
Yep. They saw that it looked like it was the same building.
Yeah.
And we're in mirror images of each other. That's why, for example, he has a door behind and on the right side of the screen, whereas we have a door on the left side of the screen and behind.
Yes, we are indeed in the same computer nook in the same department.
In the same identical
computer nook. We are not actually hiding in different rooms of the same house. Jason
No.
Keeley hasn't actually been here for the other episodes, but to the point of playing board games after work, yeah, totally, we have done that at our apartments
Yes.
before, for sure, and on weekends and stuff.
The doorknob gave it away, apparently. There you go.
Fair enough.
There you
Fair
go.
enough.
All right.
So, I was curious about how did you get into puzzles and like doing stuff with crosswords? Were you into puzzles far before that, or?
Oh, definitely. Growing up, that's what I did. You know, like saying I didn't like necessarily get into role playing games when I was as a kid. I was more of doing crossword puzzles and jigsaw puzzles, and then also playing computer games of the like that had puzzles in them, like those old Infocom text adventures. And if you know what those are, you know how old I am. So,
hey, I know what those are, and even though they were a little bit before my time of playing those games, just because they're classics.
They're classics. They're so well done. It's amazing. Some are better than others, of course, but that always got my brain going. And I think I had a subscription to Games Magazine as a kid, or at least bought it a lot. So I liked puzzles, and I was literally, it sort of happened almost the same way. I just was in the process. I had just moved to New York City, and there was a small part of me that thought maybe I'd try to be an actor, but then I couldn't really afford headshots. But my roommate was doing all that, and I was doing temp work at office buildings, and I just was always looking for permanent jobs. So I noticed that at one point there was just a want ad, and I think the Times website, and I was like, it was basically like, do you like puzzles? And I was like, yeah, I like puzzles. I majored in English. I'm good at, I know the English language, and it was all about that. And so I got this job, and it was in Connecticut at the time. So I was commuting from Brooklyn to the southern tip of Connecticut every day. And for a while I was just a proofreader, and I got to eventually sort of worked my way up to being an editor that way. And it was made a lot of friends and had a lot of fun. And there was a time when I actually left the job and then came back to it. It was a whole thing. And it's a Penny Publications and Dell Magazines. They sort of merged together, and they do puzzles, and they're all great, and you should check them out if you're ever at a CVS book stand, that kind of thing. Dell Magazines also publishes the Alfred Hitchcock Presents little digests of stories, and they're the Asimov science fiction
puzzle book.
It's
within arm's reach.
Yeah. I might. There might be one behind me. At the moment.
That wasn't a setup. I just literally keep that book on the shelf above.
Just in case she needs a crossword puzzle in an emergency.
There you go. This is the magazine I worked for a few years.
Oh yeah.
Logic Problems, which actually, it's more about sort of there are 5 people, and each of them has a different colored hat, and each of them is eating a different food or whatever. But all those were basically kind of miniature stories that had to be put around these statements, these factual statements. So that got kind of my I got a little bit of creative writing every day. So little micro stories basically. So that's how I kind of got into. I mean, I've always sort of thought about I've always been interested in writing, and I do a lot of freelance writing for Paizo and some other companies. So I feel like that really primed me for that kind of work.
All those puzzles. So I know that there's definitely mixed feelings about puzzles, and some people like Linda and I really like puzzles and games, but some people even at Paizo really don't like puzzles and games. What would you say to the people who are not sure about whether to try to use puzzles in their games, and sort of on the fence?
Yeah, I think you, as always, you kind of have to, as a GM, know what your players like too. You might be a GM who loves puzzles like me, but if I'm running for a group of people who aren't Mark and Linda, I might not put puzzles in my game because they're not going to like it, and that's no fun for anybody. But I think it's possible to do them well. There are certain things that are puzzles and aren't puzzles that some people think are puzzles. Riddles are not exactly puzzles. And that kind of thing. Well, the riddles are fun. They're not the same caliber of thing. There's myself, Joe Pizzini, and Ron Lundeen did a panel at this year's PaizoCon about puzzles in games and how to use them and ways to make them fun for everybody. So I suggest you maybe download that from No Direction and listen to that. And get some tips, more tips than I could give you right here and right now. But for the most part, again, yeah, you just have to be willing to not use them if they're in a, like say, a written adventure, and or skip over them with skill checks, that kind of thing. Like you can always work around them because some people might be playing a character that's technically smarter than they are, and there's nothing wrong with that. And you can basically, your 20 intelligence wizard is going to maybe be able to spot the connections between a bunch of clues better than you might in the time given.
Thanks for the link, Kubets. And yeah, that really that jives really well with when we were talking about mysteries. And
Yes.
you gave almost the exact same answer that we gave about whether people want to just have their characters solve the mystery or they want to try to solve the mystery. So you guys can see it's not just us; it's the industry.
The industry
standard.
Industry standard answer.
Yeah.
So here,
Puzzles are a type of mystery, right? In a way, right?
and mysteries are also a type of puzzle.
Or mysteries, they're totally connected and
Yeah.
circular. There are clues that lead you along a path to a solution, right? And you, for a puzzle to be satisfying, you need to have that feeling of progress. And same with a mystery, to be satisfying, you have to be like, oh, we're getting truth out of people, we're getting information out of people.
Right.
So they have a lot in common, and they have a lot of in common ways that you can work around them if need be.
All right. Well, there's a lot of puzzlers at Paizo, but would you say that from your professional puzzle writing that you're the puzzle champion, or is that Joe? Is that someone else?
I don't want to puzzle champion. We're all puzzle co-champions.
Okay.
Joe and Ron and I, let's say.
Okay.
I enjoy kind of creating them more than maybe doing them sometimes. But Ron is whip smart, and he comes over, and I have for all of you at home, I've been putting up a sort of puzzle on my whiteboard in my cubicle, and people can come by and solve it and get a little piece of candy if they get it right. And I've been trying different types of puzzles, and there are many, and some of the stuff I do up there is also kind of like basically riddles, but for the most part, it's sort of like, what are the connections between these things, and so, oh look, this is all of these words are written with only straight lines or something like that. It's a sort of observational, quick little tidbits.
So when you said a riddle is on a different caliber than a puzzle, which one is a higher caliber?
I like puzzles better. I think riddles, you kind of know them or you don't know them, but puzzles you should be able to figure them out.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like anytime I've seen a riddle in an adventure, it's generally like fallen flat. Either just nobody understands it, or just like
somebody's already heard that one.
Yeah, right. Like there was like an Iron Player thing where they handed me a handout, and we were trying to do it as fast as possible. So I start reading it. I'm like, the beginning of the eternity, the end of time and space, and the answer is E. We go onward.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even finish reading the handout to the rest of the players that the GM handed me because the answer was obvious.
Yeah.
So you've been doing you and Joe have been doing the puzzle hunts at PaizoCon the last few years. Are those available online anywhere for folks?
I think the first two are somewhere. If you look in the Paizo blogs, we've posted them. And you can grab them and download them. The third one is not yet available. We haven't yet got it made into a PDF format and put on to the site, but it usually takes months for that to happen. So hopefully before the end of the year we can get that up, because it was a fun one. I think people really enjoyed that one. It had a good hook in that one, which was like puzzles that don't quite work because goblins made them.
That was fun. I wish I had time to finish that one.
You still should.
I know. I
wish I'd had time to start that one.
I can always give you the printout, Mark.
The Game Mastery Guide calls.
Yeah, true.
She tolls for us all.
She's rather demanding of your time.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So we've talked a lot about puzzles, but you mentioned you got hired by Paizo as an editor. How was it like moving from that and transitioning into becoming a developer?
I mean, it was a whirlwind experience. because it was for Starfinder and the beginnings of
Mhm.
Starfinder. Just kind of like got asked if I would like to switch over to the Starfinder team working on, you know, stuff. And I said sure. For like a while there, I was kind of doing both, but not fully doing both. You know, it was like, oh, doing Starfinder development on the core rulebook, but then occasionally like, oh, we need this to be edited, so I was editing, you know, maybe a Pathfinder Adventure Path volume or something like that. So it was really transitional for quite some time until the book. Even when the book shipped, I was still not officially a developer in title, but I obviously was to everybody. Um, so it was a weird, slow transition that I think it's worked out pretty well because as often we say, or at least the editors have said, editors make pretty good developers for editors because they make the editor's job a bit easier because people like Joe and I we're always looking out for like sentence syntax and other things that maybe not and I'm not saying I'm not saying other developers don't check out for this, but if you've got the editing chops, it just makes the editing later on easier
Or
for
like
for those
Logan, the
editors.
triple class
The
editor to
triple threat.
developer to designer.
Mhm.
He's a quadruple threat because he also can do. He's done the art design on his RPG. So
Oh, neat. Yeah.
You also see like when editors work as freelancers and then they turn their things over. It's like, oh wow, look how beautifully formatted in English all this is. Look at all the things I
Right.
usually have to fix that are all perfect that I don't have to worry about.
So,
Exactly.
so when you were working on the Starfinder core rulebook, how did the opportunity to get the Starship combat system raw from Jason Bowman and do a lot of the work on that? How did that feel?
Oh, that was
Was it a good experience?
it was daunting because they were like, "You do it," and I was like, "I don't know what." I mean, it's from Bullman; it should be fine. And I was like, "Okay," but it's got to do, it's got to fit into this the concept of everyone gets a starship because I think that the general combat and starship building stuff that Bullman turned over was basically, everything costs money credits, and we wanted to do a situation where it didn't necessarily cost you the credits you would need for regular gear. So that was a bit of a challenge. And as people know, and I'll be the first to admit it, I goofed it up a bit. It's most I'll put it on me that all those weird DCs didn't quite turn out quite right because I was still learning, uh, development, and it was a rushed like project in a lot of ways because there wasn't as many of us working on it, and we had to get it done for a very specific time. So we make mistakes and we fix them as soon as we could, and they're out there and they're better. It's better now, so it's all good. So I apologize everybody out there who maybe played Starship Combat the first like 2 months of Starfinder. But if you're playing Starship Combat the first 2 months of Starfinder, maybe you're a low level. It was at the really high level when the DCs got ridiculous. That's all.
Yeah, so it probably didn't necessarily see that. I mean, that's how it goes too, right? Like when something new comes out, you gotta kick the tires for a little while to see where the air comes out, and then you can.
I'm pretty sure the other Jason set those DCs, but we also didn't play test it at level 20. So
right, yeah, we didn't.
Yeah.
That I there were a couple of days when I actually did go to one of the conference rooms and do a Starship battle against myself, trying to like make sure that it seemed to work. Mainly because for like whatever happened in the first Starship combat counter in the first Adventure Path volume.
Did you win against yourself?
I did it a bunch of times, and I usually did win. There were a couple times when there was a draw, and
Does
that made me so
you
mad.
double win because both of your sides won?
No, I don't know. Maybe yes.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
So there's a question from the chat about editing. Did you ever work with non-native English speakers?
Sometimes you don't know necessarily. Just from text, right? I think like I know that we have like a couple freelance authors who are from Sweden? No, Denmark.
Finland.
Finland.
That's
what it is. I always get those confused. Sorry.
Home of the Kalevala.
Yeah, and not necessarily the English might not be their native language, but it doesn't really show. The people we get are generally got enough of chops to give me this stuff that I can work with, right?
Yeah.
And if it's not
Yep.
perfect English, I'll just fix it, and that's
Yeah.
my
I mean,
job.
sometimes we work with freelancers and we meet them in person, and you can tell by their accent that
Right,
that
maybe
English is
not.
probably not their first language, but you can't tell that by the way that they write. And
Right, exactly.
I feel like as long as they can communicate clearly, the creativity is really at the heart of that. And if
Right.
there's just like a few little English
Yep.
things or whatever, that's the easiest type of thing to fix
Exactly.
compared to like, oh wait, this story doesn't make sense.
In fact, the non-native English speakers that I've seen, their turnovers have usually, the English has been fine. The one
Yeah.
time when I was just starting off that I thought I had one from a non-native English speaker, because the rules were really, really good and the wording was really, really not. To my embarrassment, it was an internal author who was there when I said that.
Oops.
Oops.
But
And that's when
I
you
was
learn
I
not
was
to
given
say
a
that.
printout and I didn't know.
Mm.
Whoops.
And like you said, Linda, it's the ideas are the core. And if you have good ideas, it doesn't matter what the language is around them exactly.
Right.
You can always fix that a lot easier than you can fix a bad idea.
Plus, the kind of rules, language, and structure, and the patterns that you have, like
Yeah.
in adventures, can give that kind of scaffolding to try to
Yeah.
build some things up. So if you see some particular turn of phrase, it's like, that's not usually the preposition that you would use there. Then it's like, oh, okay, whatever, I'll fix it.
Absolutely. Kubit says, and that is how Mark made a friend for life. Oh yeah. No, they thought it was funny, and I think we're maybe like using substances while writing it. So now everyone knows who it was.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
I now know who it is.
Yes.
That
So.
makes it even more awkward. All right.
Okay.
At any rate, so you worked on the Starfinder core rulebook. So what did you get into within Starfinder after that?
I basically worked on the first Alien Archive, and then a bunch of Pact Worlds, and then at that point, I switched over full time to the Adventure Path, taking over at like Volume 5 of the Dead Suns Adventure Path, and then doing like 6 or 8 of those in a row, before we got Chris Sims, who is now also gone, to do the next. Basically, it's having someone to switch off doing the adventures and doing the support material in the back. And that's what I've been doing since then. Just that, day in, day out.
So what
right.
are you most excited about coming up with the AP line?
I am very excited about Attack of the Swarm! Exclamation point.
Don't forget the
mainly,
exclamation point.
You have to
mainly
have an
because
exclamation
of that
point.
exclamation point. I am very excited that we got that. I kind of suggested it as a joke, and they were like, it was like, yeah, I like that. And I was like, okay, now I got to make sure it's cool with the editors. And they're like, oh, we can deal with that. So very.
I like how they were just, we can deal with that.
Yeah, that was Judy.
Okay, Jason, we can deal with that.
I was like, oh, very cool. And it's only for 6 months or so. But it is one of our bigger threats in the setting is the swarm, the sort of Tyrannid / Zerg like hive mind of voracious locusts in space insects come, and you're part of the military of this planet that gets overrun, and it does not go well for you at the beginning, and it's all about sort of like fighting this nigh unstoppable threat. Because it starts off in a very sort of gritty war movie situation, very Starship Troopers, very World War II kind of genre, right? But it does go to some weird places, mainly because 6 volumes of just fighting the swarm over and over again, I thought might get a little boring. So because I was the one writing the outline for it, it gets weird.
Okay. Whereas like Giant Slayer's kind of more played it straight with like, you're gonna slay some giants, then you're gonna slay some more.
Yeah, that's sort of able to, you worked your way up to some giants and then slay them. But though the ending of that gets pretty cool. I don't know if I can spoil that, but there's a cool thing you get at the end.
All right, you heard it here first, folks. You get a cool thing at the end.
At the end of Giant Slayer, but in Attack of the Swarm, you do a bunch of cool stuff. You basically, get to a certain level that you are able to win this war.
Yeah. I'm curious, does anything interesting happen if you're playing a Sheeran in Attack of the Swarm?
There is a lot about there's a lot of backstory about the Sheeran in the adventure, so it's definitely a fun way to maybe explore your species, historical background, because the Sheeran, for those of you who don't know, used to be part of the swarm and then gained independence somehow and were able to break free. So we explain basically how that happens a little bit in some of the back matter, and then there's some reasoning why the swarm are attacking this particular planet that you're on.
That makes sense.
Do you have a favorite species in Starfinder?
Oh, I have so many favorite species in Starfinder. I don't know what to do. I was thinking about this Attack of the Swarm AP in that if you wanted to, you could play a party of insectile bug-like species and not have any of the players be the same, because we have a fair amount of them at this point.
Bugs versus bugs.
It's just bugs versus bugs, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And but one of my I've been thinking a lot about the Bantrids lately for other reasons, and those hold a particular place in my heart of their weird wheelie bottoms. And there was another one I was just thinking. No, I can't remember. Oh, the Vildararo are basically a sort of a trilateral sea anemone creature.
Huh.
Yeah,
That's cool.
they're really cool. The art of the one piece of art we have for one of them is just so good that it made me fall in love with them.
So are they they're flying around in the little bubble spacesuits and stuff like that, or?
Well, they have feet, so they just kind of bloop, bloop, bloop. And they're like 3 foot tall sea anemones. So
Aww.
yeah, and they have basically three eyes sort of spaced completely around their heads, and
So
they
it's
just kind of
that
have this
the
sort of
water Zorn in a way. Because how Zorn has the trilateral symmetry,
Oh,
the
yeah,
3 eyes and stuff like that, kind of the water Zorn. Yeah.
And they have that sort of top that has almost looks like beaker hair.
Do they have Vildararo Vildaravens in the Fae equivalent of that world?
Maybe. Well, something to explore.
All right. So Kubets has another question. Have you ever, when you were working on something in development, sort of had a eureka moment where you figured something out and you realized that if you had figured it out much earlier, that it could have helped out?
Yes. Yes, all the time. Sometimes you just have to work with what you've got and let that pass by. But sort of just reading other adventures and playing and just reading every stories in general has always helped me get a little better. Just sort of specifically, the Attack of the Swarm AP is sort of this war-based AP, and I had assigned most of it. I assigned all the adventures and had assigned sort of most of the back matter at that point, or me and Chris had it assigned. And I realized it would be why didn't I think to port over the troop rules from Pathfinder? We already have swarms, right? It's just almost the exact same thing. So I had to
swarm.
Yeah, well, there is a swarm of swarm at one point.
Would it have both the swarm subtype and the swarm subtype?
Well, the swarm capital S doesn't have its own subtype.
Oh, okay.
So we saw that bullet. I knew that bullet was coming, and we dodged that bullet pretty early on in the first Alien Archives. And we can't give the swarm subtype because we have the lowercase s swarm subtype. But I had to juggle some stuff around, and I had to get someone in there to basically write up some troop rules. And then as I was developing the adventure where they would first appear, I was like, they don't quite work the way I want them to, so I had to do a bunch of juggling. But eventually I got it to work out, I think, and it's all the better for it.
Hooray! All right, let's see.
Hey, Trey says, I just got the sub. I super love the criminal organization article.
That was a fun one. That was actually written by our very own Lou Pelazar, one of our editors, and they did a great job. And this got some fun, especially the one piece of art in that has it's called a thief drone, and has a little face drawn on it, a little sad
Aww.
face on it. Makes it look pretty cute.
That's funny.
Night Fox says, if you get eaten by a swarm, are you then swarma?
I will not tolerate puns, except for on the backs of the Adventure Path volumes.
What about on the backs of map packs? They're kind of infamous for this.
Really, the backs of a lot of things have puns and others.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like the
Yeah,
one
yeah.
place in Paizo products when usually it's like, yeah, don't do the puns, and then somehow like on that first line on the back of text, it's like, here we go, guys.
Yep.
I still think my favorite one of those maybe first world problems on the back of one of the one of the Fae
Fae
books.
books. Yeah,
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 yeah.
That was a good one.
Yep. So do you ever get to play Starfinder?
Yeah. I was running it a bit for some for my wife Paula and some other people. They were actually all playing species that didn't have spines, basically. A lot of invertebrates.
So were they a spineless squad?
They were the Invertebrate Investigations was the name of their group. And they basically worked on some station solving problems for people. And it was very silly, and because the people that we play with, like Crystal Fraser and Amanda Hammond and Lissa, were just goofy as hell, and Lou as well. So we're just sort of like, she was like playing a jellyfish who was a star, and like an icon jellyfish.
Yeah, because it's a star.
And, yeah. So it was
It should have been a
really
starfish.
goofy. That was so. We do have the Astrozoans.
Yeah.
And that's what Paula was playing. So, just a bunch of goofy stuff.
All right. Linda is trying to do the emoji on my account, but she typed it wrong, so I fixed it.
Well, I just now got emojis. I need to go.
Hey, you don't have the squirrel yet. That's only unlocked at tier 2.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I got this
I
one.
still have the squirrel on my computer from when I made it.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got the Leshy and the wand.
That's true.
All
So,
right.
So when how often do you get to do your own writing now that you're at Paizo?
I mean, most of what I do is the freelance that I have is for Paizo. So
Yeah.
I'm doing writing, and I'm working on that now. I have something coming up eventually that's due in a month or so, and that's good.
Mm-hmm.
I like it, and keeps me busy. I've squeezed in a few things here and there. Sometimes freelance editing, like I've done some freelance editing for like Alex Zagunis in his big sort of like Starfinder third-party skills book, which is pretty fun. And I did the last Return to Freeport adventure for Green Ronin a year or two ago. Yeah, so it's at the end of this, and I had there was just sort of like someone else dropped out. That's sort of what happened to a lot of the APs that managed to do. Is other people dropped out, and I was like, they asked me if I wanted to step in. I was like, sure thing. So I hadn't read any of the adventures before that, but I got to write the last one,
The
which is a
pinch
little daunting.
hitter AP.
Mhm.
author.
Yeah. Hey, I'm there. So this is basically something that someone dropped out, and that's how I got to write Temple of the Peacock Spirit, which is my first Pathfinder AP, which was also massive.
Oh
And
yeah.
a little bit before that, a friend of mine actually had to drop out for something, and I got to write a weird adventure for Cubicle 7's Laundry RPG.
Ah.
I haven't heard of
and
that. What's that like?
it's a Call of Cthulhu system basically, and it's sort of got Lovecraftian elements in it. It is the Laundry is a series of books in England about this like sort of secretly shadowy organization that takes care of like weird breaks in reality, but the main character has kind of like a computer programmer way of looking at things.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of like tech jargon, and a lot of it flew over my head when he's like talking about like, oh, you need to do this, and it's basically like hacking reality kind of stuff. So it's kind of there's a bunch of stuff that I didn't quite get, but yet I still managed to write an adventure for. They had like a weird sort of like military supplement and is like, I don't know much about the military, and also it's supposed to be like written as if the players are British, and I'm like, I'm not British, and I don't know much about computers.
British
so,
military.
I don't know about Britain
Yeah,
or the military or tech. I'm gonna
Yeah,
write
so-
a British military tech adventure.
The only thing that they
Exactly.
usually teach in the United States about the British military is that during the Revolutionary War, they wore red coats and they liked to march all in line and be killed by guerrilla warfare attacks from the colonists.
Yeah.
Yep.
So not knowing anything, I did what I always do, what I always fall back on when I panic, which is to make the adventure about time travel, to make it even harder. So it's like,
oh yeah, because it wasn't challenging enough. Time travel was
exactly.
one of the hardest things to handle in a satisfying way.
Let's go back to the Revolutionary War, the only time that we knew about.
Well, I mean too, because also like everybody has a different sense for like what makes a time travel adventure that will click for them versus
Sure,
like,
yeah.
I don't like that type of time travel. Is loop time travel good, or is like is closed loop time travel, or like do we need to make sure that we have a way that we get into it, or
Closed loop would be really not great for a adventure that the PCs are playing.
oh yeah, totally.
Because
unless they break the
that
loops
would
in
mean
there.
that everything that, well, then it's not closed loop.
Yeah,
But
no, I
that would
know,
mean
well,
that
it
everything
starts
they
that way.
did didn't matter because it was already done. But
yeah, right. It's already destined.
Uh-huh.
This was more of a like time fractures
yeah,
situation.
those happen a lot more often in a game version.
Yeah.
Night Trace
And-
points out the PFS special. Well, that one you weren't exactly time traveling. You were more experiencing
events in
events.
the past and seeing them, but you
Right.
couldn't fundamentally change what was happening. That was very important in the construction of that PFS
Yep.
special, because the last thing you wanted to do is like say things and be like, guess what, everybody? Now we've changed the setting retroactively. Now figure out
yeah.
how this propagates through. So it's
Also,
more
to be
of a
fair,
chance
you
to-
guys weren't allowed to use time travel because there was direction that time travel is not a thing in the setting.
at the time, yes.
At the time,
At the time.
Minds were changed.
yes.
Well, I mean, you take a look at Return of the Rune
Yes,
Lords.
in
Yeah,
fact,
that's
from that same person.
That's
so
what I
the
said,
minds
minds
were
were
changed.
Exactly. I broke James Jacobs' brain a little bit because I did a similar thing, and when I wrote Temple of the Peacock Spirit, there's a time dragon sort of early on, and I wrote the encounter as if the time dragon were not acting in linear time, the same linear time that you're acting in. So there's like there's basically 5 rounds of things happening, but like your first round is his 4th round, so this happens, and he was like, you broke my brain. I was like, success.
Success, victory.
That's hilarious. So
Yeah.
Kubets has another question. Jason, how do you always keep your ideas so fresh? Do you have any sources of inspiration that you get your ideas from?
I think the way we try to keep things fresh is we have lots of brainstorming with everyone on the team, right? When we do an adventure path, it's not just one person's singular vision, right? Even when it is like, say, Signal Screams was kind of like my idea from the start, but I had to, I got help from everybody on the team to sort of focus it and refine it and make it the best idea it could be. Not to mention the fact is when we give these ideas to authors, we're giving them as a sort of a rough outline with a lot of some details that we think need to happen, but the authors contribute a great deal more to it. They always sort of give their own spin on things, and so that helps to make everything feel a little fresh. And I'll take it in. I'm like, oh, this is great. This is the bones of this are great. I just need to massage it here and there just to make sure it matches up with the previous adventure or the one that's coming next, right? Or is in the same sort of style and tone of our general adventures. But in general, I just sort of consuming other stories is just a way to think about stuff. I am comic books and books and movies and video games, and just sort of like you can always borrow liberally from that kind of stuff, as long as you give your own spin to each particular idea, but it can always spark something new in your brain.
Consuming all the media that comes before you, like the Swarm, but for media.
And then there,
Right.
because sometimes you know where your inspiration is coming from, and sometimes it's just that you have all these different ideas and tropes that come from all the different things you've read and heard and seen and watched, and they kind of combine themselves in unexpected ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Jason, you were talking about at the beginning of when you started off, and you were sometimes beginning when you started off with Starfinder, you were doing some editing, and I
Mhm.
happen to know you did some editing on the Pathfinder Second Edition core rulebook. Is there an
Oh
interesting
yeah,
story at all about that, or is it just we need more editors?
it
Jason,
was
help!
it was a little bit of I was had a little bit of extra time on a week, and it was they needed help, so I was like, I'll take the skills chapter and just edit through that. And that was I basically sort of knew what I knew from when you were running us through some playtests a while back. But for that point, after that, it was all kind of new to me. But it was very interesting, and I am very much looking forward to being able to play it when it's. I mean, I guess I could technically start playing it because some of us have the books in our office, but
How
when something happens in a larger scale, it looks it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm very excited.
Very cool, and we
Yeah.
should get that game started up again too with Shona. Whatever your last
Yes.
name is, it's Sheila Hymark's maiden name.
Astamari.
Yeah, Astamari, something like that.
Astamari. Yeah.
Yep. That was a fun Shattered Star game that had 16 different players, so we would rarely get 4 to show up. Because it's Paizo and everyone's busy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Alright.
Nitro says, working on second edition, did you take anything back with you to Starfinder from second edition to play around with as a dev?
There's like noticing how much there's some similar DNA in a lot of Starfinder and what is going to be second edition. That looking at what was on second edition, so make me recognize that that's still true, and like just sort of thinking about like just bulk this afternoon, right? I was like, oh, that's right, yeah, you're doing that in second edition. That's pretty awesome. I did notice. Oh, that would be. I don't know if that would be a spoiler. Can I spoil something here about second edition?
Not if it hasn't already been said.
Not if it
Probably not. Okay,
hasn't
never
already
mind.
been said.
It's like a super minor thing, but I won't.
You
I won't
can
spoil
type it to me in the.
Oh.
In the Hangouts chat?
Oh wait,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
actually, that would appear on their screen.
Never mind then.
Oh yeah.
Hey, don't worry about it. But there's something in it
You
that
can
I think
type
is
that to
pretty.
me in this chat.
This
I'll
Hangouts
say
one,
this chat, and I'll tell you if it's something that you could say.
Okay.
It should have pinged on your screen.
Yeah. Well, hold on. Let me find it. Where'd it go? Okay.
Chat is voting yes that you can, but in actuality,
Unfortunately, chat, you are not Paizo executives.
Yeah,
Therefore, you're not
I'll
one
tell
who receives
Jason
a
if he
vote
can
in
say
this.
it.
And neither are we. Alrighty. So in the meantime,
But it's taking me a minute to write it.
There definitely is.
Nitro says, "Time to spend my XP."
That's right. You can say it.
Oh, it's been revealed. Okay, good.
Yes. People saw that in PaizoCon.
It's something that I only noticed myself just today. Is that if you have a certain strength score, you can basically power through having your armor check penalty, right? So if you have like a chainmail that has a -1 armor check penalty, but if you have a whatever it is, 14th strength, you get to ignore that, and I think that's pretty cool. And we have kind of similar thing in heavy weapons in Starfinder. It's like
Right.
if you have a certain strength score, you can wield this without a penalty. But having that sort of like, yeah, I think it would be kind of cool to port over to Starfinder in the future for if there's a second edition Starfinder, for instance, or something like that.
I would really want to use the ABC, although I guess it would be ATC with theme instead of B,
Right.
character creation in Starfinder, because I feel like that Starfinder's character custom ability points as you go up in level, of course, are exactly the same at 5, 10, 15, and 20. But
Right.
character creation itself, ABCs gives you a little bit more opportunity to, say, for a Solarian, have stats that are a little more well-rounded rather than, like, if you have your strength and your charisma and then your other stats are mostly 10 on your Solarian and you might have some issues before level 5.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, we definitely, take a look at that. I'm sure someone might be always having that in the back of their brain for whatever the future might be.
I'm gonna just try to do it the next time I start a Starfinder game, like just flat out, and theme just give 2 instead of 1, and just
Sure.
I don't even have to make any decisions or do any game design. Just flat out use it and start. It makes your character a little bit more powerful, but it should be okay, I think.
That's mostly fine. I think as long as you don't have anything, right? And I think it's the same with second edition. You can't get over 18.
Yeah, you still can't get two 18s, but the typical character that's trying to max out, like the Solarian, might have 18 strength, 16 charisma, and 10 in everything else in Starfinder. Whereas with ABC, you could have 18 strength, 16 charisma, 14 dex, 12 con, and 8. Well, maybe not 12 con because if I didn't put an 8 on the other one, but you could have 14 dex at least, and then 10, 10, 10. So there would be a little bit more in your third or fourth stat.
Yeah,
mostly it's pretty similar.
Having those sort of like minor your quaternary stats, right, being slightly higher, it's not going to break the game. It's like, oh, I'm having intelligence of 10 instead of 12, or 12 instead of 10, and maybe I get an extra skill point. And in a way that, I don't know, that kind of stuff, I think in games is good. I don't have a problem with having a character being a little more fleshed out.
Yeah. I like playing my 14th level fighter now is like what, 20 strength, 14 dexterity, 16 con, 16 int, 16 wisdom, and 10 charisma or something like that.
Being able to flesh out your lower stats, I think, is definitely helpful, and that's sort of what the ABCs are all about, because as we've said before, the system that Starfinder used for ability scores was a prototype that we were working on at the time in second edition. And we liked everything about the way it worked, except that at first level, it kind of just encouraged you to put really high in your top stats and then leave 10s in your other ones. And we wanted something that could encourage, just like you said, Jason, to encourage you to like put some of your lower stats in for your character, and hopefully ABCs can help do that.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. What was your favorite part about Signal of Screams? Because you said that was your baby, that was your idea.
The ending. Oh gosh, I don't know, without spoiling too much. There's a thing that happens at the end of the very first adventure that Chris Sims wrote, which I think is kind of mean, but in a great way of the way horror adventures work. I think we did okay. I mean, I haven't really had anyone talk about it, but adding in sort of like the corruption mechanic back from horror adventures and sort of tweaking it for Starfinder was something that I actually worked on, wanted to have happen. So I gave it to myself to write. But hopefully that worked out pretty well. And I like that opens up a big can of worms that we didn't really get all into because we didn't go through every single corruption possible, right? We just kind of did the shadow corruption, since that's the one that the adventure's based around. That was a lot of fun. There is a part at some point in the adventure where, and I'm just going to say this because there's a beautiful piece of art of it too, where you just come across a giant beating heart in space.
Nice.
And it's creepy and weird, and I love it.
Do they get to slay the spire?
No. Wait, that's the name of a video game.
Yeah, the boss is a giant beating heart.
Oh, I didn't get that far in it. Okay. No, you don't. But you do go in it. You go inside the heart and do a bunch of stuff inside of it, and it's weird and like metaphorical in a lot of ways, but also gross and very Hellraiser-y.
Yeah.
Now, it seems like a very cool, like, sci-fantasy horror story that you couldn't really necessarily tell that exact story almost in any other setting than this one, which is a cool thing about it.
And then the second adventure, it kind of has like essentially like almost literal corporate zombies, which is a different kind of existential horror, which is fun.
Corporate zombies.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a metaphor for something, though.
It might be.
What was that? There's something earlier. Who was saying something about like John and Thirsty having like some kind of paperwork based haunt or devil or demon or something like that?
What? I don't remember that.
Okay.
I remember someone on the Discord was saying that like maybe John could be like a rock star.
Yeah, well, we like to joke sometimes about like putting ourselves into our work in that regard.
Yep. All right. Well, that sounds pretty cool. And looks like we've kept you for about an hour. Do you guys have any more questions for Jason while we've got him? We'll look through. I don't see any more in the chat right now. We'll give them a little bit more.
Any other cool stuff going on with you that you wanted to talk about, Jason?
Let us know.
Nothing I can talk about yet, unfortunately.
Okay. Oh, Kubitz has another question.
Yeah.
What are the top 3 favorite books from that bookshelf that is sitting right next to you?
Behind me here?
Yeah.
Let me look at it because I need to take a quick look.
Okay.
There is a fair amount of Neil Gaiman on the bottom here. And just because I recently watched the Amazon Prime miniseries, Good Omens is a good book. Read it. House of Leaves by what is it? Mark Danielewski, I think, is a weird book. Every time the word house appears in the text, it is printed in blue ink, and nothing else does that. It's about a weird extra-dimensional space. It's really good, and the pages get all funky and weird, and it's literally a challenge to read. Probably the 3 John Hodgman's books of fake trivia.
All right.
Just sort of that's definitely my aesthetic.
Awesome. And
geez. I'll give you the 4th one too. I completely forgot. My good friend from college, Maureen Johnson, writes a bunch of young adult fiction, and she's got some really good mysteries that have come out in the past couple of years that are really good. And one of them is Truly Devious and The Vanishing Stare. I'm gonna just plug my friend there.
Yeah, you might as well. And then Night Trace has one more question.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any advice, go-to advice for people getting into Starfinder that are just getting in right now?
Like getting into there's always specifically getting into it, like playing it, or did you want to like get into the business of it? Because that's 2 different questions.
I love how you said
business.
Yeah.
Starfinder.
Business.
But if you were getting into the game, I would run out and get that Starfinder beginner box because it is pretty good. I didn't have anything to do with it, basically, and I think it's fantastic. And basically running it as part of the Delve at PaizoCon and playing in it once or twice on stream. I really like it, and if it's good for your if you haven't played RPGs before, and even if you have, it's a good, refreshing, nice, clean way to get into stuff that happens in Starfinder.
All right. And was that last book The Vanishing Stare, the sequel to Truly Devious?
Yes.
Because someone in the chat was asking, they couldn't quite hear.
Looks like MaureenJohnsonBooks.com.
Yeah, you can go right there.
All right. So let's see. It looks like you guessed correctly. They did mean as a player.
Okay. Yes. But if you wanted to like getting into like writing and freelance and stuff, start writing stuff is how I say to anyone who wants to get into writing RPG stuff. Start writing stuff for yourself. Start honing your craft, basically, right? I think Wayfinder is doing another Starfinder issue in the next year or so. So get in on that. Find out. Go to look up Wayfinder on Facebook probably, and look and see when those submissions are in, and write for that. Because they take fiction, they take short adventures, they'll take like items and class features and that sort of thing. They take just about everything.
Wayfinder's a great place to get started. That's the first place I submitted anything to. So
I was excited to get a short story in there, and it's a little bit of a shame that it's only coming out once a year, but Tim's got a life, and I understand that.
Yep.
And it's probably very expensive for him to print and give out for free.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, I'm one of the few Paizo staffers who had an article printed in Wayfinder. That person was already a member of the staff.
Just because you got hired after.
Yes, due to the exact timing of my submission of the Wayfinder article compared to when I got hired and when it got printed.
I think something, I don't remember. I think I remember sitting at at my editor's desk and getting the like Ustalov issue and remembering that I submitted something for it. I was like, oh, here it is.
There you
Yeah,
go.
a couple
Oh
weird
yeah,
items.
so you too then.
Yes, welcome to the club.
Yay!
Yay.
No Heart the Shark is wondering if that makes it canon. Nope. In fact, I specifically for the Cheliax book, I was like, you know what city in Cheliax is just big enough to be interesting, but they definitely wouldn't do in any other article, so I won't like hit somebody else. Sonara, they're definitely not going to go there, but then they did, and I think it gets wrecked in Hell's Vengeance. So my Sonara article is definitely not canon.
Very nice.
But if you want a Sonara that doesn't get wrecked, that is in the Cheliax Wayfinder article.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks for your questions, guys. Thanks for being on the show, Jason. We were glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, in that case, what we'll do is we'll say goodbye to YouTube. Bye, YouTube.
Bye.
Bye, YouTube. Bye.